On all of this, one of the many people watching it is Professor Nirmala Gopal, Professor of Criminology and Forensic Studies at the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Professor Gopal, good afternoon to you and thank you for your time. So many different aspects to pick at here. Let's just pick up where Zuleka left off. The way in which Senzo Mchunu told President Ramaphosa that he was disbanding this task team, and he couldn't even remember when he had told the president. Might have been January, might have been February, the decision, as we know, taken at the end of December. But this was, if I understand the chronology correctly, a task team the president himself had announced. It struck me as a little bit surprising that he seemed to tell the president in this offhand way, a task team you announced is now being closed.
Good afternoon, Stephen. Good afternoon to your viewers. Yes, absolutely. Casual for something so important. And clearly, as you rightfully mentioned, the fact that the president himself had constituted or directed for the constitution of the task team to have such a casual conversation around its disbandment, it sounds ludicrous, actually.
Does it mean also, I mean, the way in which MPs and Julius Malema and others, the evidence leader too, sort of had to keep pressing Mchunu? Did the president agree, yes or no? And Mchunu first said he agreed with the briefing, and then he eventually, when pressed, said he agreed. I presume now the president himself will have to be called to this and asked the same question.
I think all suggestions begin to point to that, Stephen. But I think also in addition to that, when we talk about, his Senzo Mchunu's reluctance or his attempt to confuse everyone through his contradictory testimony, I think that's expected of someone who's lying, so because of the kind of lies that we are seeing play itself out here, but at the same time to ensure that the president is protected, I think all of that is starting to play out here through Senzo's testimony, really.
I mean, this goes to one of the frustrations of MPs. They seem to be frustrated that he's not giving direct answers. And that, generally speaking, I'm no expert on this, but that is maybe not a good sign.
Absolutely not a good sign. And I think if I can backpedal a little, we saw that through Sibiya's testimony as well. Beating about the bush, not being able to give direct responses. All of that, if we're sitting in a court of law, that would be so important, not just the verbal cue, the verbal articulation, but the non-verbal as well. And I think we are seeing a very similar pattern emerge from whom I initially thought would be far more authentic and honest in terms of his testimony. So, it's just very sad for the Minister of Police, someone who's right at the top in terms of being the guardian for safety and security in the country. And through social media, conversations, etc., you can see he's losing ground very, very quickly with the majority of viewers who are actually participating or, the various platforms who are participating in these engagements. He's losing ground very quickly.
The other aspect of all of this, which Mchunu focused on, was the recording of this conversation between Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi, as we all know, the police commissioner, the provincial police commissioner in KwaZulu-Natal, and Cedric Nkabinde. So Nkabinde, at the time, as I understand it, was Mchunu's chief of staff. Mkhwanazi was trying to get a conversation with Mchunu and about the decision to close the political killings task team. From what we heard in that recording, from the way it was translated, from the context around it, to sort of oversimplify it and sum it up, Mchunu seemed to be suggesting that Mkhwanazi was threatening him, essentially saying, if you think you were clean, if you're sure you were clean during your time in KwaZulu-Natal, well then go ahead. And the go ahead is in reference to closing the PKTT. How do you view that? I mean, if Mchunu is right and Mkhwanazi was threatening him, that would put some pressure on Mkhwanazi's version of things.
Of course, definitely it would, but I think all of that will have to be tested once again through, a recall of Mkhwanazi. But of course, it could be an interpretation in as far as Senzo is concerned as well. because remember, this is a last-ditch attempt for Senzo to try and reclaim his credibility and restore his reputation. But of course, we do know that it's so far gone now that this last-ditch attempt is quite weak in itself. So interpreting that and wanting to cast some aspersions on Mkhwanazi is not something that we shouldn't expect, because I think I have a strong feeling at this point in time that the higher echelons of Parliament right now are really concerned about the kind of popularity that Mkhwanazi is actually receiving. If we have a barometer, we'll see how high up on the barometer of popularity he actually is.
Politicians don't like to be threatened, do they, Prof? Okay, so next week, the evidence in chief, so this is evidence being led by the evidence leader, Norman Arendse, that will come to an end. Mchunu will then face questions from MPs. How do I put this? I don't think they'll be as polite as Arendse has been.
No, definitely. Although we saw Arendse losing his patience every now and again in terms of how Senzo was actually responding, and I think largely because Arendse could poke holes in what he was saying, I think the MPs are definitely not going to be as patient. If we think that Arendse was actually patient, I think the MPs are going to be on the other end of the spectrum. There's going to be no leniency on Senzo. And of course, largely and justifiably, because he's at the head of security in the country.
So we've had some of his evidence now, and obviously we've seen Mkhwanazi testify before this committee before. Do you think we're likely to see Mkhwanazi having to come back? So he gave his version. We've had a response from Mchunu, or the majority of the response. He'll give the rest next week. Is there going to be a need for Mkhwanazi to come back? I mean, I would think if I were him watching this, I don't know if he's also commenting on the YouTube channel, but he might well want to sort of come and respond to some of the claims made by Mchunu.
I think it would depend on the terms of reference of the the ad hoc committee. But there are some suggestions that it might be necessary for him to come back, and I think largely to test some of the counter-allegations, or not really the counter-allegations, but also some of the rebuttals, which we know are not very credible at this point in time, because we've had corroborating evidence between, the allegations from Mkhwanazi, then we had Masemola, who corroborated most of that evidence, as well as General Khumalo. So I think in all likelihood, remember that the evidence seems to be stronger on the side of Mkhwanazi, Khumalo, and Masemola versus Sibia and Mchunu, for example. And in a court of law, you would either want to re-examine or recall the witness, and if that's part of what needs to happen here to achieve the outcomes, then I think they might have to institute that.
Professor Nirmala Gopal, really appreciate the time this Friday. Thank you very much.